And to understand more about this situation, our earlier segment, we had a conversation with His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piket, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia. Let's take a look.
G7 leaders have agreed to push for a ban on imports on Russian gold. But, there has been 6 packages containing also a complete ban on all Russian seaborne crude oil and petroleum products. And this covers 90% of Europe's total consumption of oil and also gas, especially from Russia. How has it been so far, these 6 packages of sanctions?
Well, we've seen the impact grow of these sanctions since they were first begun in February this year. It's a long haul. Let's understand that this is not military warfare, but this is economic action in order to undermine the warfare capability of Russia. It was a conscious choice, a political choice of the EU and others, not to fight the war directly.
But the sanction is developing, sir. But the invasion as well is going on, and even it's also developing. How will the sanctions stop Russia from, expanding the invasion towards Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we are convinced that the sanctions are working and are gradually hollowing out the capacity of Russia to finance its war machinery. Secondly, sanction is not the only thing we do. Of course, we continue to work on diplomacy very, very strongly. With the G7, with the G20, in the coming couple of days here in Indonesia, in Bali, where Indonesia is hosting the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting, important platform for us, and also diplomacy in the UN framework. So that diplomacy remains an important tool for us. And thirdly, I would say, support Ukraine. The country is fighting a heroic war against the Russian aggression. We are supporting Ukraine with finance to keep the government running, but also with defense materials and arms in order to strengthen the Ukrainian capability to push back the Russian army.
So it's good to hear that the balancing act is also, there's a lot of diplomacy that's being supported, because what we hear mostly being stated are the financial, of course, humanitarian aid and the security aid that's being sent to Ukraine. But having that said, the Ukraine in June has officially been declared a candidate for candidacy to run for the EU membership. Now, how is that going to benefit Ukraine, this particular candidacy, and how long will it take for them to actually get it? Because I understand that they still have some criteria to fulfill. And what would those be?
Well, let's face it, joining the EU as such does not end the crisis and the war right now. That has to be done differently, and particularly, of course, we are calling on Russia, on President Putin, to do that, because he started the war and he must end it. Secondly, we do think, and that is what the Ukrainian leader has also said, and many others, that the perspective of joining the European Union is a tremendous motivating force for the government and for the citizens of Ukraine to pull themselves through this horribly difficult moment. And it will take time. This is not like joining a club. You pay your duty and you start playing. And no, this is something, joining the EU means that you have to build up the whole machinery of what makes the EU work, in trade, in finance, in the running of the economy, in the running of the government and other policy areas. So it's a big job, but we are ready to do that. We support Ukraine in that, and we will have funding to help Ukraine do that as well. Ukraine, and I should mention also Moldova, the neighboring country. So we are determined to make this work as soon as we can.
I'd like to dig deeper on the sanction imposed by the EU towards Russia, and you said that it's now working, right? There are many brouhaha right now regarding food supply to the world, regarding gas and also energy supply to the EU, that even EU member countries have to import from Indonesia, especially its coal. and about the Russia's need of technology from the EU. What I'm trying to ask you is, what does this 6 packages of sanction entail, and how does it really impact Russia's economy so far?
Well, they cover all sectors of the economy.
Gold, oil, energy.
From energy to finance, to trade, to transport. So it's far-reaching, but it is also targeted. It is very targeted, aimed at those companies and those individuals and those transactions that, in our assessment, help Russia's war machinery.
What's the measurement, like the concrete measurement that enables you to say that, oh, our sanctions are working?
One concrete measurement is the availability or not of certain goods, microchips and technology that Russia can use for building its arms, for producing missiles and so on. That is one very concrete thing, and we have put an end to the export from the EU to Russia for that sort of person. Secondly, finance. It is many of the Russian banks that are linked directly or indirectly to the Kremlin,
like the SWIFT system, right?
Have been locked out of the SWIFT system. They can't do business internationally anymore. They can't finance the companies that are also sanctioned by the EU and that are connected with the warfare. No, that's a very objective sort of result. Thirdly, we are talking about transport, the targeting of transport firms and companies, whether it's maritime or land-based, that have aided in the transport of goods that are suspect and to be related to the warfare. That is one other very objective reason.
So,
very important to. You mentioned food, and now we have a global crisis potentially facing us for wheat, for fertilizers, for vegetable oils. Ukraine was and should be a major exporter and wants to be. However, what we see right now is clearly that Russia is blocking these exports from Ukraine. That's 25 million tons of wheat sitting in silos in Ukraine, can't go anywhere. And who suffers? Of course, it's not Russia, but it is countries in Africa and in Asia that pay the price. Availability is a problem, and price is a problem. So that is a very big problem. Let me stress one thing very, very clearly. It's not our sanctions that cause the problem. There is no EU sanction that targets food or agri-food or fertilizers or the like. Nothing at all. There is no sanction that forbids third countries, whether it's in Asia or in Africa, to buy from Russia. And to pay for this via banks that are functioning and inside Russia even now. So there is no such limitation coming from the EU for this particular sector. And I make that point very strongly because often you read it's the sanctions that cause the trouble. No, it's the war that causes the trouble, and the sanctions are a follow-through from that war. And it's a disinformation that Russia is spreading, including in countries around Africa, in order to try and divide the African countries to set them up against the European Union and others. Right. So this is a very, very bad business that we're seeing now, but we defend ourselves very, very vehemently against that.
So just for clarifying, you said that it tackles all sectors that would finance the war, and that does not include the food security or food sectors. It does not, it does not prohibit other countries from doing business still with Russia in regards to the food supplies. But having that said, though, is that applied in the EU countries?
Absolutely.
So just out of curiosity, we always hear about sanctioning Russia, but we hardly hear what are the details and what's happening towards, the countries in Europe. I understand you are a 27-member country, and you must feel, the ripples and effects of this war and the sanctions that you have, consciously made the informed decision to put on Russia. And how are you coping with these? Because as you mentioned before, the food security, and are there countries that are very much struggling that perhaps you as the EU, as a collective, are supporting, or what is the condition right now?
Well, we are, of course, paying a high price for this war. That's evident. We have lost 2%, going to 2.5% of our GDP growth forecast already now, and the longer the war lasts, this will go up. We have an inflation, June this year compared to a year ago, of 8.3%. That is horrendous, and not just as a statistic, but of course this is because citizens are currently paying bills for energy, for food, that are a lot higher than what they used to be paying. And so yes, there is an economic and a social impact, and of course it requires political drive to pursue this. Why do we think we must do this now? Why do we think we have to pay this price now? Because our assessment is very, very strongly that if we let this happen, if we let Russia conquer Ukraine, then the next one will be other countries neighboring on Ukraine, and that will suffer the same fate. And that is profoundly disturbing for Europe's stability, for Europe's security, including the European Union's stability. And we feel that pain. We neighbor on Ukraine, on Moldova, we neighbor on Russia, 6 or 7 of our member states, not counting the maritime borders. So this is very, very direct. And I always ask people to try and imagine what this means for you, and would mean for you in your country, what we're having. Also for Ukraine. There's 10 million Ukrainian citizens displaced, either internally or, in the case of 6.5 million Ukrainians, have fled to the European Union. I mean, it is 25% of the population.
Right.
Imagine that on an Indonesian
So what
scale.
are you doing to cope with it? I mean, like countries-wise, are you supplying from other suppliers, or could this perhaps be a good momentum to take drastic industry measures for sustainable energy resources? What are the options and alternatives that you have?
Indeed, separate food from energy.
Yes.
And for food, we have, as EU, still a secure situation, an expensive situation, but secure. Energy is a different story. Russia has been turning off the tap for 7 or 8 member states already, fully or partially. The expectation is there that this process will go on, and that indeed about 30 to 40% of our gas imports coming from Russia are at stake. And we've got to do something for that in the short term, in the longer term. Short term, we're buying LNG on the global market. We've bought from Norway, from the United States, from Egypt, Israel, Qatar, maybe others, who knows, Indonesia, where we wish to do that. So purchasing on the global market is one step. Secondly, of course, we have to drive forward our renewable agenda, renewable energy agenda, much faster than we thought we had to. And it was already fast, but now it's going to be even faster. And because that is our determination. We have to cut the dependency on Russia as regards oil and gas.
Right.
In the very immediate run, we have a major challenge, of course. We see the European winter coming in November, December this year. Quite cold.
Yes.
It's really interesting to talk about energy, because some of EU members are envisioning to import coal, especially from Indonesia. And it begs me a question that whether the target of transitioning towards clean, renewable energy will be disrupted because of, getting back to coal usage in Europe. Would that impact your target in fully transitioning towards clean and renewable energy, or it, stimulates or make it faster even?
It's more the latter than giving up. Our targets remain rock hard for the EU to be carbon neutral, zero emissions by the year 2050. That is our determination, and we will deliver on that. Right now, correct, we will be using more coal than we thought we had, and purchasing coal even on the world market to bridge the very difficult period, a challenging period we will have ahead with this coming winter.
Right.
But that is an incidental situation, a momentary, short-lived situation that will be compensated for by the faster rollout of renewables, solar, wind, hydrogen, and faster rollout of energy efficiency measures, simply cutting our use of gas.
This is an emergency time, right, to use coal. But I'd like to shift from energy, Kai, to sending military facility or military capabilities to Ukraine. That we know that Western allies have also been sending Ukraine supplies of weapons and also ammunition, even as they have refused to join in the battleground. How has it been so far, and how has Russia reacted to continued supply of ammunition and military support from Western allies to Ukraine?
Well, there's been two types of supplies. One is from the EU as a union. We have, for the first time ever in our history, gone down this road of providing arms to a third country that has to defend itself, and it needs modern and sufficient technology to do so. Secondly, there have been also individual member states that, of their own accord, but in the same sort of policy, reached out to Ukraine with support. And this is being delivered now. I don't have the details, and nobody would tell me.
Will it turn the balance of the table, sir? I mean, like by sending ammunition and also support and not joining. I know it's very risky to join battle in the field because we can spark World War III. But would it turn the balance of the table by doing that?
I'm not going to speculate or crystal ball, but certainly President Zelensky has repeated many times over that Ukraine needs more arms from friendly nations in order to defend itself and in order to recoup the territory that it has lost since February. And that help is what we are providing.
So if we're talking about military assistance, I'd also like to highlight what you mentioned, that there's ongoing diplomacy assistance as well. And you also slightly mentioned the foreign ministerial meeting that will be held here in Indonesia. As you know, that President Joko Widodo was recently flown up to Europe to Germany for the G7 summit, and also to Ukraine and Russia. And he seems to, his goal in mind was definitely food security for the world first. Now, my question is, what do you think will be discussed at the G20 meeting upcoming for the foreign ministerial level? And do you think that President Joko Widodo's effort to help diplomacy will also help both parties to find a solution? Because for me, perhaps it's what's the media is saying. Everybody is so focused on the physical side of the war that there hasn't been enough, attention on the diplomatic efforts that apparently is still ongoing behind the scenes.
And we have to also remember that President Joko is the first world leader to visit both countries at this time of crisis, right?
Well, indeed, and this was a courageous visit, so two visits in fact, but also logical in the situation of what Indonesia currently represents on its own, the fourth largest country in the world population-wise, but also as G20 presidents see. So very welcome to see this has happened. We very much hope that the visit to Moscow has been able to convey to President Putin the sense of urgency that the world has in stopping this war, because that is what it is about. The war has to end, the Russian troops have to go back, so that after that one can start having a negotiated, lasting solution for the evident tensions that there are between Ukraine and Russia. So that is what we hope to see. We hope that the G20 foreign ministers meeting later this week in Bali can elaborate on that, and it will discuss the political side of things. Evidently, that's what foreign ministers are for, but also see how this impacts on the functioning of the global food security and the global system whereby economies work together in order to deal with common threats. And so the European Union will be there as EU with our High Representative representing us, but also 5 member states of the EU are part of the G20. So we will have a very hopeful, a very positive and significant contribution.
But from the EU's perspective, as well as yours perspective about President Jokowi's visit to the two countries that are now in conflict, would that turn down the heat? Would that make difference?
Well, we'll have to see, but the answer is essentially in the Kremlin to that. This war wouldn't exist if there was no Russia waging war. The Ukraine was not aggressive in any way, was not threatening even anybody concretely in any way. So if Russia decides to stop the war and withdraw its forces, then peace will break out, as they say. So. And that is what we have to aim for, to create the conditions for that decision.
For me, there's only one question. It seems like there are a lot of people speaking to Ukraine. Are there enough parties speaking to Russia as well?
Well, I do think so, that we have all the doors open for that. And the number of EU leaders that visited Moscow before the attack has been, numerous, and it was all in vain. And the experience that our leaders had was very much that President Putin was lying into their face by denying that the attack would come, that the invasion would happen, and that's what it did. So there has to be a movement somehow. Who can prompt that movement? Possibly Indonesia, after the president's visit. The UN has to play a role, evidently, as mediator, but maybe also other countries. Turkey is very active, and so that is what we have to reinforce, the positive forces, in order to bring Russia to the table for the sake of peace and stopping the bloodshed and stability. And secondly, for the food security and the energy security of the whole world. And that is a very real thing. We have the strong sense that Russia is using the food risk for particularly the African countries as a bargaining chip, as a tool for putting pressure on Ukraine and on the EU and others. We utterly reject that. It's criminal to go down that route. It is a blackmail over the lives and livelihoods of poor countries, especially in Africa. We hope instead that platforms like the G20 will be able to convey to Russia, you've got to do something. This cannot go on. For the sake of humanity and for stability on Earth, you have to stop this war.
Right. Ambassador Piket, thank you very much for your time and for your insightful thoughts. We do really appreciate of your time. And hopefully the war will end soon, as we are still in the wake of recovering from COVID-19 and we don't want any trouble again.
Yes. Hopefully so. But thank you for coming once again.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to see you soon, because there certainly is a lot of updates when it comes to European Union. Because
That's
there are
right.
a lot of members and a lot of countries, and I'm always here to give our viewers the latest updates. And we're going for our first quick break. When we come back, we'll have the latest from Southeast Asia and around the world. Stay tuned with us.